Hi, everyone. This is Margaret Manning with lifeafterdeath.com. Lifeafterdeath.com is a community of people who are fascinated by the topic of life after death. We will explore topics related to near-death experience, the afterlife, and also touch on the fear of death, which a lot of people deal with in their lives. Now, that's in fact the topic that I wanted to talk to you today about. Now, if I was to ask you to imagine that you had a terminal illness, how would you feel? How would you describe to other people what you were going through? It might be very scary. You might have regrets or talk about being afraid to leave people behind. Your thoughts might be dark. You might be filled with regrets and with feelings of guilt or unfinished business. But it turns out that people who actually do have a life-threatening diagnosis are not as afraid of dying as those who imagine it. Now, that sounds really strange, but in an article that we've written, I'll leave a note to it so that you can read it in full. The research is by Amelia Goranson and Ryan Ritter. And they've actually been examining the feelings of people who actually have a terminal illness and find that it's significantly more positive than the feelings of a person who is imagining that same reality. So why is that? Why is the fear of death worse than the reality? Well, I've always thought to myself, well, it's like everything else. Like when you're actually worrying about it, it's 10 times worse than the actual doing it. It doesn't matter whether it's standing up in front of an audience and speaking or whatever, going on a plane if you're not comfortable. The actual doing of it is easier than the thinking about it. So that's possibly part of it. But according to this research, it's really that when people are looking to the future, they tend to think about negative events. They tend to think about those negative events in isolation, and they don't see them in the context of the reality that somebody might be going through if they have had the experience of a diagnosis and then time to talk about it and see, in a way, create a hopefulness that there will be life beyond that diagnosis. It's not so black and white. And one of the researchers, Kurt Gray, said, and I think it's a really good quote, he says, "We talk all the time about how physically adaptable we are, but we're also mentally adaptable. We can be happy in prison, in hospital, and we can be happy at the edge of death as well." Researchers said that. So imagining a bad situation in the future, people tend to focus only on the negative aspect. But having a terminal illness is very tragic, of course. It's tragic on so many levels, but it can bring you closer to your family and your friends. Now, I know this is going to sound really strange, but I think some of you know that I worked with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross when I was in my 30s, and I helped her to organize her life, death, and transition workshops, which she held all over Europe. And the idea of these workshops was for people who were experiencing a diagnosis or were a family member were invited to come and work through their feelings. And sometimes it involved anger, sometimes it involved bargaining, all those stages that Elizabeth talked about. And they were just the most powerful experiences for me because I was watching people be transformed by just working through. So when they have the real reality of an illness and the inevitability of death, they were able to handle it in a different way. And I remember Elizabeth saying to me personally, and this was in a private conversation where she simply said, Margaret, when I'm ready to die, I hope I die of something like cancer. And I think it was in response to perhaps a couple or a woman. It was a woman whose husband had gone out in the morning to work and had been killed accidentally by a train. And she never got to say goodbye. And it was just a horrible experience for her. But, so she didn't have time to prepare. But Elizabeth said, if I have time, I have a context. I mean, nobody wants to die of anything, but cancer is very painful sometimes. But she thought that would be, in her mind, an opportunity to pull it all together. And that somehow the fear would be dissipated by that reality. And I actually really agree with her. I mean, not that I'm facing, thankfully right now, I mean, we all are going to have that experience at some point in the future. But I do understand that research that says, people that are facing imminent death have a much more positive, if that's possible, way of dealing with their mortality. And in fact, the same researcher said, I'll read this again, individuals facing imminent death have had more time to process the idea and be more accepting of the inevitability of their death. They're also going to have a very good idea about how they're going to die, which in itself is very nerve-wracking to some people who have a fear of death because they don't know how it's going to happen or when or what's what the reality will be. So at least in quotes, these people know what they are dying from. So I guess the question now, and we raise this in the article, so please go out and read it and get some understanding of it, is it time to let go of some of our fears of death? For those of you who are watching who have a spiritual foundation, then it's going to be a different reality for you. But many other people are concerned about the end result of death or the process of dying, and other people worry about the existence of afterlife. There's all these complex questions that we raise as we're facing our death. But that's part of why we're here on lifeafterdeath.com. We really want to have a conversation with you about these topics. And if you have a fear of death, let's talk about it. Let's see how we can help each other to get a perspective, to sort of get some lens on this question. And I guess I'd be interested to know, what do you think about this study that shows that people who are facing a terminal illness are actually more positive about their death than those who imagine it? What do you think about this study? Were you surprised to hear that our imagined death is harder for people to deal with than the real thing? Very interested to have a conversation. Leave your comments in the section below, and I hope that you've enjoyed this little chat about the article topic and read it through and look at the research in more detail. But thank you for being here. Thank you for your support and for your curiosity and for your open heart in discussing these topics. I look forward to sharing more information with you in the future and hearing your own feedback on this topic as well. Take good care, everybody. We'll talk again soon. Bye for now.